I hesitated at the top of the stairs leading down to the basement. Greg had warned me not to go down there, but what if something or someone was down there? I couldn't ignore it. I steeled myself and opened the basement door. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I descended into darkness. The air was cold and musty, making me shiver. I turned on the flashlight, casting a narrow beam of light into the basement. The room was filled with old furniture and boxes. Dust floated in the air, and cobwebs clung to the corners. I took a cautious step forward, shining the light around. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, I saw it. At the far end of the basement, there was a door slightly ajar. My curiosity piqued. I approached it, feeling a strange pull to open it. Greg had warned me, but I had to know what was inside. As I reached for the doorknob, I heard a noise behind me, a low growl. My heart dropped. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. The sound had come from somewhere deep in the shadows. I took a step back, feeling the urge to leave, but something kept me rooted in place. I felt drawn to the door. I took a deep breath and slowly opened it. The cellar. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Beyond it lay a small cellar. The air was even colder here, and the smell was musty and rotten. I could barely see inside, so I stepped in cautiously, the flashlight illuminating the small space. The walls were made of rough stone, and the floor was damp with moisture. In the dim light, I saw something lying in the corner, something covered in dirt and debris. As I approached, my heart raced. I shined my flashlight onto the object, revealing a bundle wrapped in cloth. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I reached down to touch it, but the moment I did, I heard the footsteps again, this time behind me, louder and more urgent. I turned quickly, shining the light toward the entrance of the cellar. Nothing. I stepped back, trying to shake off the panic rising inside me. But when I looked back at the bundle, I saw something move. It was a hand, pale and skeletal, reaching out from beneath the cloth. I gasped and stumbled backward, tripping over a stone and falling to the ground. Trapped. I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing. The footsteps were growing louder now, echoing through the cellar and upstairs. I could feel panic rising in my chest as I raced back toward the basement door, desperately pulling it shut behind me. I locked it and pressed my back against it, my breath coming in quick gasps. What was happening? Was someone in the house? Had Greg known about this? I bolted up the stairs, my feet pounding against the wood. I reached the top and turned to lock the door leading to the hallway, but just as I did, I heard a loud thud from behind me. The basement door had burst open. I screamed and ran down the hallway, searching for a place to hide. I dashed into the nearest room and locked the door behind me. My heart raced as I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my breath. I could hear the footsteps again, louder now, moving through the house. I strained to listen, terrified of what I might hear. They were coming closer, echoing through the hallway. Then, silence. I held my breath, waiting for what felt like an eternity. But then I heard a whisper, faint and almost ghostly, drifting through the air. Help me. The decision. I felt chills run down my spine. Who was that? I could barely think. I wanted to run, but something kept me rooted in place. The whisper came again, softer this time. Help me. Please. I had to make a choice. Should I stay hidden and wait for morning, or should I find out who or what was calling for help? I knew I should call the police, but my phone was in the living room, and I couldn't risk making any noise. Summoning all my courage, I slowly opened the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty. I stepped into the darkness, the floor creaking under my feet. I felt like I was being watched, but I pushed the feeling aside. I made my way back to the basement door, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to face whatever was down there. I slowly turned the knob and opened the door. Confrontation. The basement was dark, but my flashlight illuminated the path ahead. I stepped down the stairs cautiously, my hands shaking. I needed to see what was happening. The cellar door was still open, and I took a deep breath before stepping inside again. The cold air washed over me, and I shivered. The bundle was still there, and I could hear faint sounds coming from it, cries for help. As I got closer, I could see the outline of a person, their face partially covered. "Please, help me," they whispered again, their voice shaky and weak. I felt a rush of panic. I didn't want to get too close, but I couldn't leave them there. I knelt down trying to see the person's face. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. I was trapped," they said, their voice breaking. "Please, help me get out." "Trapped? By who?" I asked, feeling a mix of fear and compassion. "I don't know. It was so long ago. They left me here. I don't know if anyone even remembers me anymore." I felt a wave of sadness wash over me, but I also knew I had to be careful. "What happened? How did you end up here?" "I was just a kid. They said I could stay here for a while. Then they never came back. It's been years. Please, I want to go home." I felt tears well up in my eyes. I wanted to help, but the fear kept me frozen. I needed to think. Suddenly I heard footsteps again, coming closer and closer. Panic surged through me. "Get back!" I shouted, but it was too late. The door swung open and a shadow loomed in the entrance. The truth revealed. It was Greg. His eyes were wide and wild, and I could see anger etched on his face. "What are you doing down here?" he demanded, his voice low and threatening. "I was trying to help," I shouted back, my voice shaking. "Help? You shouldn't have come down here." He took a step closer, and I could see something glinting in his hand, a knife. Fear gripped me. "What is going on? Who is this?" I pointed to the bundle on the ground. "That's not your concern," Greg shouted. "You need to leave, now." "No," I cried, feeling a surge of courage. "I'm not leaving without them." Greg's expression changed, a mix of frustration and fear. "You don't understand what you're getting into. This is my family's secret. You need to forget what you saw." I glanced back at the bundle. The person inside was struggling, and I felt a wave of determination. "I can't just leave them here. You can't keep doing this." Greg lunged at me, but I dodged out of the way and grabbed the flashlight. "Stay back," I shouted, shining the light in his face. He stepped back, momentarily blinded, and that gave me the chance to run toward the cellar door. I sprinted past him and up the stairs, not looking back. I heard him shouting behind me, but I didn't care. I just needed to get out of that house. Escape. I raced through the hallway, nearly slipping on the wooden floor as I reached the front door. I fumbled with the locks, my hands shaking. The footsteps behind me were getting louder, and I could hear Greg shouting, furious. "Get back here," he yelled. With one final push, I managed to unlock the door and throw it open. I burst outside into the cool night air, my heart racing. I didn't stop to look back. I ran to my car, fumbling for the keys in my pocket. I heard the front door slam behind me, and I could feel Greg's presence closing in. I jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. Just as I put it in gear, I saw Greg running toward me. "Stop!" he yelled, but I didn't listen. I slammed the gas pedal and sped away, leaving the old house behind. The aftermath. I drove for what felt like hours, my heart still racing. I finally pulled over to the side of the road and took a moment to catch my breath. I could hardly believe what had just happened. I tried to call the police, but my hands were shaking too much to dial. Instead, I drove to a gas station where I could gather myself and use a public phone. Once I got there, I called and reported everything about the house, the cellar, the body. The operator took my information and promised to send someone to check it out. As I waited, I felt a mix of fear and relief. I had escaped, but what if they found the person in the cellar? What if Greg got away? The investigation. A few hours later, the police arrived. I explained everything I had experienced, and they took my statements seriously. They drove me back to the house, which looked even more sinister in the daylight. When we arrived, I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't want to go back inside, but I knew I had to help. The police searched the house, but it was empty. No signs of Greg and no evidence of what I had seen. Then they went to the basement. After several minutes, I heard them call me down. "Come here," one of the officers shouted. I rushed down the stairs, my heart racing. They had opened the cellar door. Inside, it was just as I had left it, but now the bundle was gone. "It's empty," one officer said, looking confused. "There's nothing here." "But I saw them," I insisted. "I swear, they were here." The officers exchanged glances, and I could tell they didn't believe me. I felt my stomach drop. Maybe I was going crazy. Suddenly, one of the officers found something on the floor, a necklace, old and tarnished. He held it up, and my heart skipped a beat. "This was left behind," he said. "It might belong to the person you saw." I felt a rush of hope. "You have to believe me. They were here." The officers nodded, but I could see doubt in their eyes. They promised to investigate further, but suggested I go home for the day. Home again. When I got back to my apartment, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I was safe, but the events of the night haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Days turned into weeks, and the police continued their investigation, but they never found Greg or any evidence of the body. I tried to go about my life, but I couldn't stop thinking about the person in the cellar. Were they still trapped? Had they ever existed at all? One evening, I received a phone call from the police. "We have some information," the officer said. "We need you to come down to the station." My heart raced as I drove to the station. I was nervous, anxious to hear what they had found. When I arrived, they took me to a small room where a detective was waiting. "We've looked into Greg," he said, pulling out a folder. "He has a history of similar complaints, people disappearing in the area. We believe he may be connected to several cases." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" "He has a history of house-sitting jobs where strange things happen," the detective explained. "We believe he may have been involved in something much bigger than just keeping an eye on houses." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But what about the person in the cellar? What happened to them?" The detective sighed. "We're still investigating, but we think there may be other houses involved. We need your help to identify any other locations he may have used." The search. Over the next few weeks, I worked with the police to investigate Greg's other house-sitting jobs. We visited several locations, but each time, we found nothing. No signs of life, no bodies, just empty homes filled with dust. I started to feel like I was chasing a ghost, but I couldn't give up. I wanted to find the person I had seen, the one who had called for help. Then one night, I received another call from the police. "We think we found something," the officer said. "You need to come with us." I jumped in my car, my heart racing. They took me to an old house on the outskirts of town, one I hadn't seen before. As we approached, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. The officers led me inside. The air was thick with dust, and the floor creaked beneath our feet. I followed them to the basement, my heart pounding in my chest. When we reached the cellar door, the officers opened it, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I stepped inside, and my flashlight illuminated the dark corners. And there, lying in the corner, was another bundle. I gasped, rushing forward. The officers followed closely behind, and as I got closer, I could see the outline of a person. My heart raced as I knelt beside them. It was a girl, young, frail, and covered in dirt. Her eyes were closed, but she was alive. "We found her," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "She's alive." The officers quickly radioed for medical help as I held the girl's hand. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm here," I said, choking back tears. "You're safe now." Conclusion: the girl was taken to the hospital, where she received the care she needed. The police arrested Greg shortly after, and he was charged with kidnapping and several other crimes. It turned out he had been using his house-sitting jobs as a cover for his actions. I couldn't believe it was finally over. I had helped save someone. The girl and I developed a bond, and she told me her story. Together, we began to heal from the trauma. The experience had changed me forever, but I was grateful for the outcome. Sometimes, even in the darkest moments, hope can shine through. And as for Craigslist, I learned to be more careful with opportunities that seem too good to be true. Because sometimes, the things that hide in the shadows are more frightening than we can imagine.